with our Indigenous neighbors is a priority of the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality. As such, we are collaborating with First Nation governments and Indigenous organizations to develop a respectful and meaningful territorial acknowledgement. This work also presents an opportunity to learn more about the culture and history of the Indigenous peoples of the region. Please be advised that tonight's meeting is available to attend virtually and is being streamed and recorded. Can I get a motion, please, to amend the motion that the order of the agenda be amended to discuss business arising after the delegation and after receiving admin report number 43. Moved by Councillor Penny, seconded by Councillor Souls. All those in favor? Carried. Can I get a motion, please, to adopt the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Souls. All those in favor? Carried. We have with us today Katrin Saxty from Urban Systems. Welcome. So Ms. Saxty, to your left is our CAO, Mr. Scott Berry, Deputy CAO, Mrs. Laval, Ms. Neller, Ms. McIver, Councillor Gerwing, Councillor Andrews, Ms. Hanson, myself, Gary Foster, Councillor Souls, Councillor Penny, and behind you, our treasurer, Mr. Ryerchuk, Ms. Adhikari, Mr. O'Shaughnessy, Ms. Thomson, and Ms. Shepherd. Thank you. Did you want to proceed with your presentation, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you all for the opportunity to be here before you this evening. Urban Systems and Urban Matters have had the privilege of working with the great team here at Northern Rockies on the Housing Needs Report. And our purpose here tonight is to report back to you on the key findings and insights from this work. Before we get into it, I just wanted to introduce our team because it's not just me here. The rest of them are hiding. So yeah, I would love to kick it over to Kelsey to introduce herself first, and then Matt, and then I'll do the first bit of the presentation tonight.
Thank you, Katrin. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Kelsey Tyerman. I am a community planner with Urban Systems, and I've had the privilege to work on various housing needs reports in northeastern BC, and I've been really lucky to be a part of this work. So I appreciate being here tonight and getting to meet you all.
Hi, likewise, I'm thrilled to be able to be part of this, the delegation tonight and presenting. We have worked on, Urban Matters has worked on a number of housing needs reports around the province, including in northern communities like the Peace River Regional District last year, and really looking forward to hearing comments and questions from council this evening. So back over to you, Katrin. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. And just for you in the room, my name is Katrin Saxty. I'm an urban planner and a principal with Urban Systems just down the road in Fort St. John. So lovely drive up this afternoon. Been up in the Peace Country for 18 years, but I never had a plan, so I'm still here. We all know how that works, right? So yeah, it's great to be back up here. I've done a lot of work with Northern Rockies over the years in bits and pieces and everything from prior to your incorporation as a regional municipality. Lots of work with Jerry Ton and Randy McLean back in those days, and you know, various projects over the years leading up to this, and also working with Krista and Rada on the Downtown Refi project as well right now. So lots of things going on, and it's great to be here. So if we could go to the second slide in the presentation. Wonderful, thank you. So this evening, yeah, Kelsey, Matt, and I are going to guide you through the following agenda. So I'm going to do an overview of the Housing Needs Report and data collection and limitations, and then Kelsey is going to talk about the key findings, and then Matt, I believe, is going to talk about the key areas of housing need in the Northern Rockies and next steps. So we can move on, please. So just to summarize sort of the provincial context around here. So the province of BC actually outlines the collection of a number of data types related to housing. And this has come about because so many communities in BC are experiencing housing challenges, particularly related to escalated housing costs. A little bit different up here. And in 2019, the province set out legislation that introduced the requirement to have a housing needs assessment done. It had to be done by 2022. There was funding in place to facilitate that because it was mandated by the province. And so, yeah, so the first reports are due this spring, and then they need to be updated every 5 years. And so this is really great because it really does feed into some of your higher level policy plans, such as your official community plan, and really helps provide direction when you're thinking about land use and implications. And it also gives you a really good snapshot about what the situation is with respect to housing in the community. So it's a little bit tricky for this one just because of some of the data that we're dealing with. A lot of it deals with census data. So it is a bit of a looking into the rear view mirror, but we'll get into that a little bit more. So we've updated it as much as we could with all the census data that was released, with the latest release being April 27th. We did some last minute revisions to the report with new data, so that was great. The next release isn't until July 13th. So we'll see how we move forward with that. Some of the other things too that we just wanted to flag is that some of the data that we use, Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, it doesn't have data for smaller communities. It's very limited, and also because of a small population size, just the privacy aspect comes into play. So it's a little bit tricky for some of our smaller rural and northern communities to get a really robust sort of quantitative snapshot. But there are at least 50 data types that we look at throughout these processes. So it's pretty robust from that quantitative piece regardless. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So the housing needs report for Northern Rockies was initiated in March of this year. So we reviewed a number of your policy documents and any other reports that these guys behind me sent to us. And so all of this was helping us get a pretty robust understanding of where you guys are at with respect to policies and just your housing portrait. We did the data analysis, as I mentioned, so that created the framework for the report that you have before you, I think. And then in May, we shared a draft report. Actually, I think it was late April. We shared a draft report with the team, and because it's data driven and we don't have the commentary from a lot of local agencies, these guys were just outstanding and really helping us frame up the local context. Because yes, I live in the north, but I don't live in Port Nelson. So really great commentary to really help refine the data to reflect what's going on in Fort Nelson today. So huge thanks to these guys. So, and then the presentation here before you is sort of the last piece in our work to date, and just reporting the findings back to you. So just really quickly, just wanted to comment on the data collection and some of the limitations, which I've already alluded to. There's a lot of topic areas that we look at: local demographics, population growth, age, income, employment, housing stock. When was the home built? How many bedrooms does it have? All these kinds of things. What kind of condition is it in? We also talk about the cost of housing, and there's some great graphs in the report if you flip through it, where you definitely see some peaks and some valleys quite recently too. So quite a lot of fluctuation in what we've seen here in Fort Nelson. And population dwellings projections, we look at historical trends, but then we also project forward. So that's a really key part of it. And the sources mainly are Statistics Canada, BC Assessment, building permits and development information from you guys. And then again, the extra input from staff, which was, like I said, really outstanding. Normally, when we do a housing needs report, we look at both quantitative and qualitative data, but just because of the time constraints with this, we've only looked at the quantitative piece, but it has been augmented by the qualitative data from these guys. The other piece too that we really wanted to just flag is, because the census was done last year, but they like to take a good 18 months to release all the data in bits and spurts, just to keep you on your toes. So we are dealing with a lot of 2016 data, and we know that's not reflective of what's going on today. So that's why I said, as the data has been released, we've been updating the report. And so that's just something to be mindful of. And we did rely very heavily on Northern Rockies staff input. So that was, yeah, that really helped refine it, because otherwise we're looking at it going, this is not reflective of what's going on here today. So that's just, we just wanted to put that out there. That is one of the limitations with respect to the report before you today. So I know I've gone through that very quickly. Are there any questions so far before I kick it over to Kelsey? Okay, Kelsey, it's all yours.
Great, thank you. So we can move to the next slide, if you don't mind. So the data we're about to dive into is covered quite extensively in the Housing Needs Report itself. But just for the purpose of this presentation, I'll be going through some of the highlights or those key findings that were analyzed to help get a better understanding of housing need in Northern Rockies today. So first things first, looking at the community overview. When looking at census data, we understand that the regional municipality has experienced an almost 21% decline in the population over the last 10 years. So in 2011, there was almost 5,000 people living in the regional municipality, which has since decreased to 3,947 as of 2021. So while there was a slight population decline of around 3% from 2011 to 2016, the municipality recently saw a more steep decline of around 18.8% from 2016 to 2021. So the next slide, please. So census data shows us that there's been a noticeable shift in the age demographics in the municipality, specifically with the aging population. In 2021, almost half of the population was over the age of 45 years of age, making up the top two block bars there in that graph on the left. And so we also see that the senior population, which is categorized as 65 years of age or older, has almost doubled from 7% to 12% in 2021. So when looking at the median age, the regional municipality is actually younger when compared to the province's median age, which is at 37 years of age compared to 43, but it is slightly older when compared to the Peace River Regional District, which has a median age of almost 36 years. So moving on to households and families. So as Katrin mentioned, newly released census data shows us that from 2016 to 2021, the Northern Rockies experienced a significant increase in private households, just over 15% of an increase since 2016. And so the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality households are made up primarily of census family households, followed by non-census family households. And so when we say census family, this includes couples with and without children, as well as single parent households with children. So a non-census family households refers to someone living alone or a group of two or more people who live together but don't constitute as a family. And so as we see on the bottom right pie chart, those are families residing in the Northern Rockies. There are almost an even split of families with children and without, making up more than 3/4 of families, followed by lone parent family households. So the next slide, please. So now we're going to move on to data categories that have not yet been released for the 2021 year. So the next few sections primarily look at 2011 and the 2016 census. And so as Katrin mentioned as well, we really relied on staff to help us sort of bring this picture and get the full modern update of the housing climate. So on the chart on the left, we see that from 2011 to 2016, the Northern Rockies had a proportion of owner households decrease slightly, while renter households increased. This could be related to many different influences that I'm going to cover in the next few slides, but this trend does seem to be consistent across the province when compared to the Peace River Regional District, as well as the province as a whole. There has been a decrease in ownership and an increase in renters. So our next slide, please. Taking a quick look at the household income. Between 2011 and 2016, the median household income grew by almost 9%. And in 2016, the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality had higher median incomes than the province, which is pretty common for communities in northeastern BC, which can be largely attributed to the oil and gas industry. And so it is typical for renter households' income in a community to be lower than owners. We see here that in 2016, the median renter household income was almost $57,000, which is almost half of the owner income. And so renters typically experience higher levels of what we call core housing need than owner households, and are generally less secure in their tenure. So I'll kind of dive into what we mean by core housing need in a few slides, but it's fair to say that renters are the ones who definitely struggle with housing. So now we're going to look at the housing profile. So when looking at the housing profile, we typically look at types of housing and age of housing stock. And so as of 2021 data, we found that almost 60% of the housing stock is made up of single detached homes, followed by movable dwellings. And so based on our conversations with staff, historically movable dwellings were pretty common due to the exceptionally high costs associated with stick builds in the region. It was also common for movable dwellings to be better suited to the transient workforce that is seen in northeastern BC. And so this might indicate that movable dwellings may continue to be an affordable option for households who might not be able to afford single detached dwellings. And in terms of age of housing, we'll go back, thank you. We see that most of the housing stock in the Northern Rockies was built between 1961 and 1980, which signifies that there's an aging housing stock currently, and it's likely that homes are going to be in need of major repair or renovations, especially considering the harsher climates in the Northern Rockies and the influence that that winter has on housing stock. Great, thank you. So we see that most homeowners in the municipality own single detached homes followed by movable dwellings, which is, parallel with the last slide we looked at. While renters are distributed pretty evenly across single detached, low-rise apartments and movable dwellings. We can also see that larger household size live in single detached homes and smaller households are in movable dwellings, which makes sense due to the size constraints. So our next slide here is the one that we spent the most amount of time analyzing with staff, which was super helpful. We looked into the housing prices and the average sale prices across the region. And so this data came from BC Assessment, and it looks at data from 2006 to 2021. You'll see that the average sale prices hit a peak in 2014 at around $280,000 as the average sale price, which has since fluctuated pretty drastically, dropping significantly in 2017, 2019, and 2020. So based on our conversations with staff, we understand that there are a few factors that have influenced this significant decline that we've seen in those years. And typically this could be the nature of the resource-based economy that Northern Rockies is experiencing, as well as we heard about high rates of foreclosure that occurred in the community around this time. And as well as the indirect impacts of COVID-19 on the housing market. Great. So this slide covers the core housing need. So core housing need refers to households that are not meeting the following standards. So adequate housing, which means that most homes are requiring major repairs, affordability, and that's measured as households that are spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs. And then suitability, which means that housing does not have enough bedrooms to accommodate the household or family size. And so as of 2016, affordability was the most common housing standard that was not met in the Northern Rockies, which means it's typically the largest issue facing for both renters and owners. And we see from 2011 to 2016, owner households experiencing core housing needs decreased while renter households increased. And then we see actually that extreme core housing need nearly doubled for renter households. And so when compared to other communities in Northern BC, Northern Rockies has a comparable amount or less than amount of people living below the affordability standard, which is an interesting sign. So, great. So while we didn't do any engagement for this work, we really wanted to make sure we covered seniors in this report, just considering that Northern Rockies is experiencing an aging population. And so many seniors that experience housing affordability issues, it is because they're on a fixed income. And so older seniors may find it more challenging to keep up with required home maintenance over the years. And so of the senior renter households in the regional municipality, 46% fell below at least one of the adequate suitability standards, which is seen on the far right column, while 43% of owner households fell below the standard. It should be noted that around 57% of senior households are spending 30% or more of their income on shelter costs. And just chatting with staff regarding these statistics, currently in the Northern Rockies, there are 3 options for assisted senior living accommodations. We understand that's Grace Manor, Pioneer Manor, and Heritage Place. And we understand that it used to be a challenge to fill vacancies, but as of this past April, all units are currently occupied by seniors. And just kind of looking at trends of seniors in the region over the years, we heard that it's common actually for residents to bring senior relatives up north based on ease of accessing a family doctor. So that's becoming more of a trend nowadays in the municipality. And lastly, we wanted to look at homelessness in the region. So homelessness in Northern BC is typically hidden as individuals and families experiencing housing crisis look to couch surfing or living out of hotels and motels or living in temporary housing situations. And so levels of homelessness can fluctuate with the resource-based economy of the region and the various weather patterns throughout the year. So while there is a lack of specific data on this topic in the Northern Rockies, housing needs reports that we looked at across Northern BC really highlight that there is a need for emergency housing or emergency shelters in strategic locations across Northeastern BC to address these needs and to provide support services. It is known that there's often a relationship between homelessness, addiction, and mental health challenges. So we wanted to make sure we highlighted that as it is common across Northern BC. Now passing it on to Matt.
Thanks, Kelsey. So I'm just gonna kind of summarize some of the key findings here that the data have led us to, and again, to reiterate, we've used the data to the best of our ability, and with great insights from staff, have kind of crafted these areas or statements of need. They, I think, certainly will benefit from an update using fresher census data and potentially a round of engagement with community and stakeholders to help ground truth them. But they provide a starting point, particularly kind of using the lens of a baseline of 2016 data with some updated figures. And these areas are typically sort of outlined under the legislative requirements, but local governments can kind of improvise on them based on the needs of their own communities that emerge through these reports. So some of these are part of the template that the province requires, and others are based on issues that we've identified through the research. So the first area of importance is rental housing, and Northern Rockies has available affordable housing through Dorothy's Place, which is operated by BC Housing, and a variety of affordable housing units that were available as of 2022. Despite this, there's still a small portion, as Kelsey mentioned, of renters who are experiencing core housing need, both core housing need and extreme core housing need, and can't access existing rentals in the community. In terms of home ownership, also, as has been noted, due to the resource-based economy of Northern BC, and communities like the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality, it's quite common for housing values to fluctuate and cause uncertainty in the housing market. I've worked in, as I've mentioned, Peace River, but also Terrace, Prince Rupert, Smithers, and I've seen similar kind of historical trends around ups and downs in the housing market. And so while we saw a decline in home ownership between 2011 and 2016, and a rise in rentals, we sort of identified that this trend was potentially continuing with high rates of foreclosure over the last 5 years, especially. And what remains uncertain is the impact of the current cost of construction and any indirect impacts of COVID-19 on things like the supply chain. COVID-19 has had a pretty significant impact on southern markets in British Columbia, and that's rolled out and kind of affected communities right across the province, even where housing is not being kind of snapped up the way that we've seen it in Metro Vancouver or Kelowna. It does, some of the uncertainties that were caused by the pandemic have impacted just the cost of construction and certainty around building. And so that does have kind of longer term implications for home ownership and new construction. Another issue that we've identified is the age of housing stock. In Northern Rockies Regional Municipality, approximately 46% of housing stock was built prior to 1980. And also a little over a quarter of the housing stock is made up of by manufactured homes. And we do know that housing built, but prior to 1980 in the 60s and 70s can potentially lead to issues around maintenance or the need for upgrades, or may deter first-time buyers who see a house that needs a lot of upkeep or needs a lot of renovation. And of course, the harsh winter in the regional municipality is also a contributing factor to the impact of sort of wear and tear on housing stock. Finally, that sort of links to housing for families. We should note that when compared to other comparable communities in northern BC, we looked at a few of them in the report. The municipality has a relatively high percent of lone parent families, which is essentially a single income family. And we know that lone parent families are generally more susceptible to housing pressures, and both owner and renter lone parent families are spending approximately 30% or more of their income on shelter costs, and that's covered in Section 5 of the report. As Kelsey had noted, housing for seniors is also something we wanted to touch on. This is a young community. I think I personally live on the Sunshine Coast, and we're quite an old community. And so when I see figures like the high proportion of younger folks that I see in Peace River and Northern Rockies and other communities, I think it's kind of refreshing, honestly. But as things change and as then a middle-aged demographic continues to age, it does mean that consideration for seniors housing and aging in place is going to become increasingly important in northern communities. And there are a range of housing solutions that can support seniors, everything from independent rental all the way through to in-home supports. It's important to kind of see the trends, the demographic trends, and be able to plan ahead for that. And so that's an area that we wanted to flag through this research. And then finally, Kelsey spoke briefly about homelessness in northern and rural BC. It's really challenging to get hard numbers anywhere, even in metropolitan areas, but particularly in rural and northern communities, because homelessness tends to look very different. It's not necessarily visible street homelessness. It may be individuals or families that are couch surfing or living out of hotels, or in precarious housing situations or in unsafe housing. Not so much that there are panhandlers on the street as there may be kind of a hidden pressures that households have coping strategies for, but don't necessarily allow for long-term security of tenure. We also know that in resource-based economies, that levels of homelessness can fluctuate throughout the year based on employment, based on weather patterns, but there's generally a lack of data on this topic. In Northern Rockies in particular, but also across the north, this was a barrier that we came across in our more recent Peace River study as well. And so we have identified a potential need for emergency shelters or supportive housing, but probably need to delve into kind of the need a little bit more. And I think we can move to the next slide now. Yeah. And so just some considerations for what does this all mean, because of course, a report that just sits on a shelf is of no use to anybody. And I don't think it's what the province intended when they developed the legislation. So we've just kind of identified a couple of potential next steps to really ensure that this research is of use as a baseline report. But you know, we know that as of the end of this year, the full census data set will be released, and as of early next year, there will actually also potentially be some additional data that's being released publicly through UBC in a project they have. And so while this is a long and technical report, a kind of refresher that looks at a few of the key data points may be of value to kind of bring the report up to speed, and potentially conducted in combination with engagement with stakeholders in the region to think about what steps the municipality can take to support housing initiatives could be kind of valuable next steps. Next slide, please. And so then, you know, I think when we're thinking about next steps, a number of local governments are using these reports to inform their action planning or inform their policy development. It could be, you know, a couple of targeted actions, but when we typically transition from the research into the action, we often want to spend a bit of time with local governments thinking through what their role is in the housing system. And this slide here just shows common roles that are taken on by different players in the system. And I think it's really important to note that the way that we've set up our system of affordable housing here in British Columbia is that it is, and in Canada really, it's a provincial responsibility. And in BC, that provincial responsibility is typically implemented through the nonprofit housing sector, who are responsible for a lot of the development and operations of affordable housing units across the province. Not exclusively, BC Housing certainly does do some operations, but the typical model looks at delivery through nonprofits. That being said, some of the new funding pools that BC Housing has available do support private sector implementation of things like near market rental or affordable home ownership. And then, of course, there is an important role for local government. And those roles include the work that you already do through things like official community plans and zoning bylaws and regulating land use, but also increasingly kind of advocating to the province and to the federal government on behalf of your region and your community, and partnering with you know, others in the housing sector, whether it be nonprofits or private developers or you know, other provincial authorities like Northern Health, to support new developments. Typically, local governments are not building or operating affordable housing or support services. There are exceptions to that rule, as there always are, but they're rare, and they're very contextual. So it's more, you know, I think when kind of thinking ahead to actions, the role of local government is really about setting the table and convening and bringing partners together, so that it makes it easy for BC Housing to fund a project or approve a project, and so that there are nonprofit implementation partners available. Next slide, please. And so, you know, in terms of some draft housing objectives that come out of this report, some things to consider moving forward. One is to educate residents on incentives and funding opportunities for housing repairs or renovations to existing housing stock. Working in partnership with community partners to strengthen seniors' housing and supports. Looking at opportunities to facilitate or incentivize or protect rental housing stock. And then finally, exploring housing partnerships between local governments, housing providers, industry, and senior government. And I think that is the end of the presentation. Oh, sorry, one more slide here. So what that means in terms of policy considerations is, you know, thinking about updates to the official community plan that may identify a commitment to a broad range of housing choices in Northern Rockies. Exploring opportunities for protection of existing purpose-built rental and/or mobile homes, manufactured homes, depending on the land use that's there. Developing policies and guidelines to encourage flexible and adaptable use of buildings. Working with industry and local builders to identify opportunities for, as I've mentioned, market rental housing development, affordable home ownership programs. There are also, in addition to the provincial funding programs I mentioned, there is also a CMHC, a federal financing program for market rental that is quite popular with developers in some areas. And then educating residents on the value of affordable housing and advocating for increased support or investment from senior levels of government. Okay. I'll pass it back over to you, Katrin, since you're there in person. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Kelsey. So I know that was a lot of information, really rapid fire. That really does summarize what is in these 80 or so pages of the housing needs report. At this time, I just wanted to open up the floor to any of you to see if you have any questions for myself or Matt or Kelsey.
Sure, I have some comments. The first slides that you had there were 2016, and it's 2022, so six and a half years out of date. The relevance of some of those slides, when it looks at demographics, etc., I think have changed dramatically over the past 6.5 years. So I don't know how valuable those are. Some of the other things that you've said, I know anecdotally that in my business as a landlord, I've seen some of the things that you talk about here, but I have an entirely different take on this. So just beginning in the 1st of June, as a landlord who owns apartments, I had 4 applicants for apartments. Now, I've got a high vacancy rate in my buildings, but not one of them did I approve. And not only that, but I phoned the other landlords in Fort Nelson and warned them about these people looking for apartments. Criminal records, records of destroying property, et cetera, et cetera. So when you talk about affordability or lack of homelessness, et cetera, this may be more by design than by accident. These are not people who cannot find a home and have the ability to pay, or cannot find a home because they don't have the ability to pay. They can't find a home because of their, like I say, criminal record, et cetera, et cetera. And I wanted to go a little bit into affordability of accommodation. So currently in Fort Nelson, you can get a 1-bedroom apartment for about $500. So using that 30%, you would have to earn $1,500 a month to afford an apartment, or slightly less. Most people who are even earning minimum wage would come above that. The problem that I've seen as a landlord is even people who are on social assistance have enough money to pay the rent, but for one reason or another, they don't. And some of it stems to drug problems, alcohol problems, et cetera, and simply don't meet their commitments as tenants. There are a lot of people who don't earn a lot of money who require housing. And it's been my experience that those people usually find housing, but sometimes what happens is they don't want to spend up to 30% of their income on housing. And they will be in, I think what you termed is unaffordable or housing that is not fit for them. It's too small for their family. But oftentimes this is a matter of choice. It's not a fact that they can't afford it, it's that they don't want to afford it. There's other instances that I've seen where people go out and do the opposite. They find accommodations even for, say, a couple where they are spending far more than their 30% income on accommodations, because that's a choice that they make. They want a larger accommodation than what they need, but the accommodations that they're in exceed that 30% mark. So looking at this, you would say that these people are paying more for their rent than the 30% minimum. But this is a matter of choice. It's not that this is the only place they can find to live. So those are just a few of the comments that I've seen in the community, you know, by being a landlord. Certainly there are issues, you know, where there are seniors on fixed income that, you know, have some challenges. But even there, if you take the Canada Pension Plan and the Old Age Supplement, et cetera, this probably comes up to at least that $500 level that would get you a one-bedroom apartment. May not be lavish accommodations for a husband and wife, but certainly you can meet this $500 threshold in the Northern Rockies fairly easily. Some people need assistance when they get older, and that's, I think, where places like the Pioneer and Grace Manor come into play. So those would be my comments. Anyone else? Councillor Gerwin.
Yeah, thanks very much for that report. It was very informative, and I'm sure that I will use the statistical data in my other work as well. I just wanted to express my appreciation for recognizing in-home support for seniors, but also I would take that one step further because we do have a larger lone household. Hesitate to use the word single, but you know what I mean. It's like one person, but could have a couple of kids. So with that, plus with seniors, our lack of tradespeople that can help to maintain and or renovate homes is severe. Like just even people this very short summer season trying to get their roofs done, like you can barely find a roofer this season. So I really feel that lack. And then just as I'm aging and in my own home, I would like to stay in my own home, but just finding those services that I need and anticipate that I will need is very, very difficult. So I think as a municipality, if we could, I mean, I don't have the answer, but I just was pleased to see that that was in the report. And also I would be looking for perhaps the municipality to do some planning in and around that. Yeah. That. Oh, and then the other thing is that those maintenance or trades people can help to increase the longevity of our older housing stock, right? So in thinking outside of just building new or just building more, so do we need to build more seniors complexes, or can we take what we have and maintain and renovate it as the occupants need? I think would go a long way. That's my comments. Thanks very much.
Any other comments? Councillor Souls.
I noticed I actually listened as I were going along, and I remember 2016 very well, and all the events that led up to 2016 being a point of that last census prior to the current one, and realized that we had a great deal more activity going on in 2016 than we do now. Not just a great deal, I can't emphasize it enough, that if any effort to paint or to call Fort Nelson's situation similar to other resource-based economies is misguided. If I bring people into the community for various reasons, I'll illustrate a concept here that I see going on. First thing is that when you have an absence of years and years of building houses, like no one has even dreamed of building houses here in years. All of the sales that have taken place from 2016 on to time has been people selling off older houses and buying newer houses. I mean, local people shifting houses, and then of course some people moving into the community because of affordable housing. And I get that, but you think as a council here about encouraging our building community to look at various programs available for building houses. We don't have a building community anymore. We don't have contractors. They're gone. It's simply gone. There is, like, take a drive around if you're in town long enough. Katie, go for a drive in the industrial side here and see if you can count how many shops there are and see if you find any lights turned on. It's virtually empty. So it's really fascinating to, I understand the need to use census data, but the census is just very, very inconclusive data at this point. It's very, very far off in the assessment of what we are.
Any other comments? Councillor Penny.
I'll be very short. I appreciate how quickly this report came up and very informative. And I look forward to updates as the data gets updated, because as has been stated, I'm sure we'll see a vast difference when we get this new data in. So I look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any other comments? Very well. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Ms. Thomson, admin report number 43.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So before you, I've just got a summary basically of the presentation that was provided by Katrin and Matt and Kelsey. First and foremost, I'd just like to thank Urban Systems and Urban Matters for their professionalism, their ability to meet our needs. As outlined in the report and as mentioned by Kelsey and Matt and Katrin, it was extremely difficult to use census data from an era that looked much different than what we're in today. So this really did become a bit of a collaboration between Urban and ourselves to kind of make and mold the report into something that was at least somewhat reflective of the current situation here in Port Nelson and in the Northern Rockies. So we do appreciate that collaboration and their willingness to work with us to come up with something that was at least a starting point. And internally, I'd just like to thank Hillary and Rada, who were my co-pilots on this in this journey, as well as Mike Gilbert, who provided some local context towards the end of the project. So as Urban mentioned, there are some next steps. So we're looking forward to using this as a foundation to move forward. We've identified what those key areas are that we need to focus in on, and definitely will be including public engagement in the next steps so that our next report will be quite a bit more reflective of the current situation, provided our economy stays somewhat stable or reacts normally and increases rather than decreases. So hope, fingers crossed. This was to meet legislative requirements. So under the Local Government Act, we do require a resolution from Mayor and Council to be able to submit this report to the province, which is a legal requirement to do so. So the report does request that the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality Housing Needs Report be received and adopted by Regional Council. Thank you.
Councillor Penny.
Make that motion.
Seconder. Councillor Gerwing. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Souls, myself opposed. Councillor Gerwing, Penny, Andrews in favor. Motion passes. Business Arising Union of BC Municipalities Annual Convention, September 12th to 16th, ministerial and other meetings. Ms. McIver.
Thank you, Mayor. So on your agenda is the 2022 provincial appointment book published by UBCM annually. It outlines all of the various ministries and their portfolios or their area, their scopes, and also included is the direct invitation we received from BC Hydro. They typically host meetings with local governments that they serve during UBCM. So basically open for discussion. We do have deadlines approaching to submit requests to meet with the Premier and other ministers. So as part of that, we also need to highlight which topics council would like to focus on during those meetings.
Councillor Gorey.
In addition to what is on the agenda, I sent an email to staff and to council that had a letter from Fort Nelson Family Development Society attached. So I would like to submit that to council for your consideration to try to get a meeting with the Ministry of Children and Family to address some of the issues that our community faces as represented through this note from Fort Nelson Family Development.
So the Ministry of Children and Families is one. How does council want to deal with this? I have a few on my list too. Do we want to just simply make a list of all the ministers we'd like to speak to? Very well. Minister of Energy, Bruce Ralston, regarding carbon credits on behalf of H2 Limited. Any other ministers that council would like to speak to? Councillor Souls.
Ministry of Forests regarding timber tenure in the Northern Rockies coming to reality rather than just empty promises.
Minister of Transportation regarding rail service in the Northern Rockies. Minister Fleming. Any others?
Can I just ask for some clarification? That
Sure.
Ministry of Transportation, is that specific to the condition of the line, or is it what in particular?
I would like to highlight to the minister the importance of rail service to the Northern Rockies and the condition of the line, and the fact that Peak Renewables is reaching out to the federal government for funding for the line, and also highlight the fact that we have a rail study done for northeastern BC that I'd like to draw the minister's attention to. So at least those three things. Councillor Souls, community forest, the stump and traits for community forests.
Yes, that's actually another point of discussion.
Okay. Councillor Penny.
Ministry of Tourism, I'd like to sit down with them and just see exactly what help we can get for our tourism operators up here in our area.
Minister of Communications, Citizen Services, Lisa Baer, regarding internet access. Councillor Gerwing.
I don't hold out much hope, but I think we would be remiss not to request a meeting with Minister of Health. in terms-
I'm sure he'll grant it.
Well, that would be a first for a while, so.
We
and
will
I-
put him on the list. Put
That
him on the
said,
list.
I mean, you know, we could again request a visit with the Premier to be turned
Absolutely.
down. It's always, you know.
Yeah.
we'll
We
be
tried.
batting like 4 for 4. So.
We tried. So yes, Minister of Health, certainly. Anything else? Councillor Andrews, any others that you can come to mind?
I think you guys got the major ones covered. Anything else I think would just be sprinkles.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else that would.
Just a reminder to all of you councillors, you did a fabulous job last time where we didn't get a meeting with the Premier. There was 6 of us that managed to talk to him.
Yeah. For not getting a meeting,
Yeah,
we
we
got.
managed to corner him in a hallway here or there or somewhere between venues, and it was fabulous.
And he now knows where the Northern Rockies is.
Like he said, how many of there are you? How many of you guys are here from the Northern Rockies? Yeah.
I think that's it. Ms. McIver, I can't think of anything else.
Okay, so am I formally requesting a meeting with the Premier? Okay,
Yes, sure.
names.
You know, if we can get a meeting with the Premier, that would be great. Mr. Barry.
Just additionally, we need to meet with municipal affairs to Minister of Municipal Affairs. It's a requirement. It's
Oh, yeah.
for our IDC.
Very well.
So
Yep.
that needs to be on the list too.
That would be Ralston. We would have that if we got the meeting. Okay.
Just one more thing there. So as we prepare the docket, this is to be submitted by the end of next week. Some of you will just connect back just to confirm some of the dialogue you might want to have as part of this, to fill in some blanks as part of the request when it goes to the minister. So Just expect that.
Very well. Is there anything else? Hearing nothing, I will call this special regional council meeting adjourned.